Namaskar. India, a vibrant startup ecosystem driven by massive digital public infrastructure, Aadhaar, UPI, and the like, which dramatically lowers the cost and the risk of entrepreneurship. India also has a young, tech-savvy consumer base, a growing capital availability as well. An emerging country, good policy support from the government, apart from industry, university linkages. So on our program today, we have two academics who have studied frugal engineering and its advantages. Dr. Jaideep Prabhu is the Jawaharlal Nehru Professor of Indian Business and Enterprise at Cambridge University's Judge Business School. He's been researching frugal engineering for about 2 decades. And Dr. Priyank Narayan is Associate Professor of Practice, Entrepreneurship and Management at Ashoka University, also the founding director of Info Edge Center for Entrepreneurship at Ashoka University. Now, they have most recently collaborated with Mukesh Sood as co-authors of a book which is titled Lean Spark. And both have otherwise authored several books and research papers on ideas associated with frugal engineering. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Dr. Prabhu, let me start with you. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So, but would you say that it's really necessity in India, frugal engineering, or jugaad as you first called it in one of your books, is really out of necessity in our country that they had to come up with it?
To some extent, yes, it's necessity. I think of it as a broader category of things, constraints.
Okay.
And really our approach is to see constraints as an opportunity, a spur to creativity and innovation rather than a barrier to innovation.
And Dr. Narayan, would you look at constraints? If someone is going to start something, constraints can always hold someone back. I mean, if I want to be an entrepreneur and I look at all the problems around me, I'll say, forget about it. What would you say to them to say that, you actually can convert this into an advantage?
So what happens is all of us have access to some resources and some talent. We often don't look at what we have as the bird in hand. And we often just focus only on the constraint. So what I would advise people who are looking for figuring out how they can work within the constraint is do with what you have, and that's the core of what we've talked about in our research as well, in our book as well, that the core has to come from doing more with less.
Dr. Prabhu, there are a lot of small businesses in India, and small businesses, generally struggle with capital, and maybe a lot of them decide to use what is jugaad. But at the end of the day, are they looking for short-term goals? How would you make them look for something long-term?
This is a great question, and that's precisely what we are trying to do in this book, Lean Spark. So prior to that, I had, with other co-authors, written a book called Jugaad Innovation in 2012, when India was at a different stage. We were writing then about how India had evolved in the 90s and 2000s, and I think at that stage it's fair to say that the reception of our focus on jugaad innovation was mixed. Some people were delighted that we were writing about something that is so much a part of our everyday life, but others were quite critical and felt that we were celebrating things that sometimes lead to shoddy outcomes, poor quality, and short-term solutions.
Right.
So that challenge stuck with us, and we taught a course over several years where we were trying to look at how you could take some of the good parts of jugaad, this ability to respond to constraint through ingenuity, coming up with very clever solutions, but also to overcome this short-termism, and to think about how you could take that ingenuity, that frugal ingenuity, but come up with a solution that was scalable and sustainable for the long term.
Dr. Narayan, there's plenty of venture capital available. India has got a vibrant startup ecosystem, as I was saying, government is also supporting. Why would you want to, why does one need to take the frugal approach when there is capital available? Yeah. Suppose you have a good idea and you can actually go to the market and get the funds for it and scale up, in the theoretical sense, in a faster way.
Right. Well, traditionally, if you look at the Silicon Valley model of venture capital and how they have actually looked at venture growth, they've thrown money at the problem. That money has led to an abundance of talent, resources, etc. I would actually question that not everybody has access to those resources, and therefore we need to really challenge the way that model has grown and worked and often led to very monopolistic organizations that have gotten created. There are lots of needs that need to be addressed at the grassroots level, and some of those models actually need a very different model of innovation, and they are going to be focused on how they can convert those constraints into opportunities and work from there. What we are saying is, let's be deliberate about the constraints that we have in hand and not try to create hacks on the way. And that's where, so to say, the jugaad part of it often gets a bad name. As long as it's a strategic intent to do more with less, we've got some opportunity of creating value there.
So how would you define what is a strategic interest? I mean, for instance, a businessman would look for the quickest solution, and rather than look for the long term, look for the short term gains, and that may not be solving the problem at the end of the day. You might be actually sort of creating sort of promoting scarcity as the way forward, rather than actually looking for scaling up.
Let's take an example. Let's take the case of AI, because this is now something that everybody is focused on.
Right.
And you mentioned the Silicon Valley venture capital approach.
Right.
That is a dominant approach today that many other countries are sort of trying to imitate, but I think that's an error. What is that approach? Again, as we said, throw money at, say 10 companies, knowing full well that 9 are going to fail, but one might succeed and become the global monopolist, and then you'll be able to extract rents and get a return on your income. We argue in the book that that's not really a model for India. It's quite wasteful. That kind of capital we don't have in the AI space, and even if we had it, we could spend that money on other things. But if we did spend it on AI, then it would be so expensive that the solutions may not have the transformative potential that they could for a country like India. So what we argue is that focus on the problem, is grassroots problems. Let's take the problem of primary education and being able to give every kid in India, including in rural parts of India, a personal tutor on their phone, in voice, in their language. Now that's a worthy objective. It could completely transform the quality of education and human capital in India. But to be able to do that at scale, it'll have to be highly affordable. Those solutions will, almost like Aadhaar and UPI, have to be free to the end user. To get to that, if you are developing the solutions in this very expensive way, you'll not be able to come up with a sustainable and affordable solution. So to have highly affordable solutions, your whole approach has to be frugal. And this is why the venture capital model doesn't work. Instead, you really have to focus on the problem you're trying to solve, understand that deeply from the perspective of people facing the problem, and then come up with an affordable solution.
So you're saying that there are affordable solutions all the time. That's the way that you have to look for it's like Occam's razor or something like that. You have to look for that's the easiest way out is the best. Is that the way it is?
No, I think there's a possibility of finding solutions with different circumstances and situations. And if we keep waiting for the resources, then we'll lose the opportunity of creating solutions from what we have.
I understand the model where you talked about education, but if you really want to be a big player, shouldn't you be thinking massive, large-scale investments? And then, after all, we have to be seeing India rising to the podium as one of the top 3, economies of the world.
Yeah. So we've actually talked about some stories where India has been able to scale that for 1 billion people. I mean, the classic stories of how UPI is given digital money as a frugal model in everybody's hands, and that kind of is ubiquitous. So ISRO is another example where we've been able to get to what some of the larger players in this space have been trying to do for many, many years at 1/10 the cost or even lower. So there is possibility of scaling, there's possibility of actually that transformation happening at a very, very large scale, as long as we are working within the constraints with intention and ensuring that we are able to find a solution that works in that circumstances.
Dr. Prabhu, in all your years of studying, Jugaad, Frugal, engineering, what would you say? I mean, are there gaps in the way the entrepreneur starts? You have fine-tuned a process now, which is called the Learn Spark approach.
I think, we've gone through phases in India's sort of innovation journey. In the 90s, we pioneered the back office, outsourcing model. We had very large software companies dominate that space out of India. Then in the 2000s, I think we explored a new phase, which was more around online retailing, and there too we developed very large domestic companies and so on. I think we're at a new phase, which is, I think, feeds into your previous question as well, where we're now entering a more high value add space where our innovation can be product based rather than services, backed by intellectual property. So ideas coming out of our government labs and our premier institutions, which could go into things like medical devices, pharmaceuticals, AI, and so on. These more high-tech sectors, drones, etc., space. But that innovation requires a number of things in the ecosystem. So you need a type of capital. I would argue it's not venture capital, it's more patient capital. You need also lab facilities where people can do this kind of testing. It often takes time. And you need mentors that will help not only with the science and tech, but also the commercialization. And I think that's the area where we are now developing that kind of ecosystem.
So, Dr. Narayan, we are in the AI age, and of course, semiconductors, deep tech, advanced manufacturing, all these are the areas where, if we really need to progress, these are the areas we need to enter in and perform as companies. Would you say that frugal innovation will work here?
So let's take the example of AI. Having AI available to a few at the cost that AI is today is not going to transform the society. And what we're saying through this model of frugal innovation is, can we create models, smaller language models that can work for people in their languages, often with challenges of limited internet bandwidth, so on edge networks with limited electricity access, with alternative powers and sources. So there are organizations that are working on creating these models which are not cost heavy, which are not also damaging the environment from the amount of heat that these models are generating. And that's where you'll be able to create transformation for everyone in a country of 1 billion people and more.
What about semiconductors, Dr. Prabhu?
Yeah. So I think this is a fair point, and we don't want to say that frugal innovation is the only way. Even though in a country like India, the economics do work because we have a very large number of people who are on relatively small incomes, and so from an economic standpoint, it makes sense to come up with these highly affordable solutions that you can then scale because of their affordability. Right. And
it's organic, the scaling up. Yeah.
Exactly. That said, of course, you need to also have in various sectors the kind of innovation that we recognize in the advanced nations, where there is a lot of resource behind it. You're thinking about long term, pushing the technology frontier and so forth. So we do need that as well. And there needs to be a balance. But only one or the other is not perhaps the way to go for a country as large and as complex as India.
Dr. Narayan, what is the kind of mindset that requires to be made? A shift in the mindset, let's say, in India. Do you see that, is there something that would be lacking? Because at the end of the day, if you get used to using a frugal approach, you're not actually ready to put in the money when it actually matters.
So it's a very interesting question. A lot of frugal innovation happens during the initial phases where they're trying to find the solution. But when they want to scale up, they often collaborate with larger players who can help them access the markets at a much larger scale. So if you look at health tech, for example, you can do a lot of innovation at the grassroots level, but for that to become available to a very large sort of audience, population, customer base, these innovators often tie up and collaborate with larger organizations. And that's a great way to bring in innovation, but then use the machinery that exists and building on top of what other organizations have done, they're able to reach out and scale and grow through that. So a mindset of collaboration is very important. It can't work in isolation.
And what about university industry linkages? To what extent are they helping in bringing out the best products into market using the best, most cost efficient ways? I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what is being targeted, isn't it?
Yeah. So as we had discussed earlier, what's the lack in the ecosystem? And I think for some time that was a lack relative to the advanced economies, and even China, which has made a lot of progress in bringing their top universities closer to industry and vice versa. But again, in India, we're making progress. So there's somebody we cover in the book called Manoj Kumar, who has an organization called Social Alpha, and they're producing this full stack approach that we were discussing earlier, where they're focused on the patient capital, they're focused on the lab spaces, and they're focused on providing the business advice. And they work with a lot of our top institutions, scientists coming out of our technical and scientific institutions, but also the government associations, government organizations such as ISRO, DRDO, etc., etc. So I think we're reaching that stage now where there's much more collaboration between academia and industry, and that's very important for our development in the next phase. The difference though is that the focus is on affordability as opposed to spending a lot of money, because that is relatively scarce.
And Dr. Narayan, when the focus is on affordability, what about the person who is putting in the money, the venture capitalist, let's say, or somebody, or an angel investor? Would they look at frugal engineering as an advantage, something that they need to back, or they would look at the old Silicon Valley venture capitalist approach?
I think there are all kinds of investors out there who are putting in the money, and clearly we need people who have the patience, but also people who have the sort of a larger vision of saying this is going to create the right kind of impact. And we're seeing a lot of those investors also coming forward and supporting frugal innovators and innovators who are thinking slightly differently than just resource-heavy models.
I think just on the previous point, an example of a venture capitalist who is sensitive to this very India-specific approach in areas like AI, where we're coming up with affordable solutions, is Vinod Khosla. So he has been a big champion of this approach in India. For instance, healthcare, being able to give every Indian access to a physician on their phone in their language and voice and so on. But coming back to any investor in this space, the trick here again is how you come up with your own solution as an entrepreneur. Instead of being led by the money or the technology, the key is being led by the problem you're trying to solve. And that's very much at the heart of this approach and mindset. You really focus on the problem and you choose an important problem. And there are many such important problems in India to be solved. And only when you've understood the problem from the perspective of people facing it, do you then think about what is the appropriate solution. So sometimes the word frugal is a bit of a misnomer because it suggests cost cutting. It is not necessarily about cost cutting. It is about using the available resources in the best possible way to solve that problem.
Do more with less, as you keep saying, right? Dr. Narayan, both of you are highlighting digital public infrastructure, ISRO successes and things like that. All these are standing out. I mean, they're global impact, obviously. But the point is, to what extent can they be replicated?
Well, we believe that the infrastructure that's been created around them have the ability to build on top. So you're creating platforms that are very robust and a lot of applications can be built on it and they can be replicated. A lot of other countries have actually reached out and we've now gone out and implemented some of these programs, especially UPI has been sort of taken on not just by developing countries. I think some of the more advanced countries have looked at how we've been able to create digital money and digital access to so many people. So yes, there is definitely a model of replicability in them. In fact, the reason why they are such great examples and stories of frugal innovation is their ability to replicate and work in different circumstances. There's always a need to adapt to that particular market and that particular circumstance and situation. But there's one more point that I want to bring about here, which is very important, that every time we create a frugal solution, it doesn't mean that frugality is equal to being cheap.
Okay.
It often means that there is enough value. And for different people and different communities and different economies that we may be serving, that value may be different. So we need to make it aspirational, we need to make it relevant. And as Jaideep was saying, it has to focus on the core problem that we're trying to solve in that context.
And then you brand it, and then it becomes valuable, and then its prices go up, isn't it? But at the end of the day, it doesn't remain cheap. But coming back to that point of replicating, what is it about digital public infrastructure that you say is frugal?
Yeah. So first of all, in the case of, let's say, Aadhaar, right? Again, you asked about the mindset. There was a very long-term vision to reach the entire population, and particularly those who are in remote areas who didn't have a way of proving their identity and couldn't claim government benefits. So that was the vision. And then the realization that in order to reach that scale of people, you would have to come up with a highly affordable solution, possibly one that was free to the user, but then also to the government very affordable. And that was the kind of vision that led to them focusing on radical simplicity in the design, partnering with others to do the enrollment and so on. And then the discovery of this very interesting mechanism that kicks in. When you commit to that kind of scale and you're really thinking about affordability, what happens is the economies of scale kick in, and then because you're aiming for scale, it becomes affordable, and because you're aiming for affordability, you can scale. And I think having done that with Aadhaar, we have repeated the trick with UPI and so on. And I think also to your previous point, how do you get it adapted elsewhere and adopted elsewhere? It was another aspect of the design, which was this modular design, interoperable open source APIs, which then others can adopt and then adapt to come up with their own kinds of applications.
Finally, once again, coming back to that point, whether this is producing stuff which is just good enough and not world class. Though you're saying global, impact in your book, you're producing more with less. But at the same time, you're probably producing goods which are not competing with people who are putting in a lot more money and a lot more scale, a lot more, let's say, effort in that sense.
We often use very
world-class versus good enough. That's what I'm asking.
No, so that's why I'm saying the world-class benchmarks that we've created and what we use often become a little unfair. We need to find solutions that are relevant to people. We have to put people at the core of what we are delivering to them. True. Just because somebody has defined that as world-class, and that shouldn't become the benchmark of everything that we are doing along with it. I'd also like to argue that what we are creating has the potential of becoming truly globally acceptable standards of many things that we are creating. So you're calling it a benchmark or world-class thing. I think we have the ability to create that from India. We're already seeing early signs of that, and hopefully we'll see many more such stories that we can share.
And if I may add, it's a trajectory, it's a journey. So you have to start where you are and make the best of your circumstances. And then you make your way up the value chain.
Most people will be using AI now, and that's acceptable.
That's completely acceptable, provided you're achieving the objective of solving the problem that you're set out to solve. And I think as you go along, you go up the value chain. We've seen this happen with countries that are now developed. They had to start somewhere.
Right.
Take China as well. Same thing. They had to start somewhere, manufacturing low-cost goods. What you said, good enough, maybe even not even good enough. And now, having done that, and then becoming more capable of doing more high-value-add innovation, they moved up the value chain. We think India is at that point too. It's at that inflection point.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Jaideep Prabhu and Dr. Priyank Narayan. Thank you for joining us and helping us understand what frugal innovation is and how India can benefit from it. Now, the frugal engineering advantage clearly gives India an edge. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.